Well, my name is Pattisue Plumer. I'm the assistant track coach and women's cross country coach at University of Texas. Let's see. I'm a mom. I have 2 college-age kids. I went to Stanford as an undergrad. I studied earth sciences, and I also went to law school there. And I ran while I was there, and then competed for Nike for many years thereafter. I was on 2 Olympic teams. At one point I was ranked number 1 in the world in 2 events. I had won a couple world records at different times, a couple American records. I think it was 10 all-time All-American, and multiple national championships.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. All right. Something caught my ear on that was the law school thing. Can you tell me a little bit about why and how you, like, what was your motivation there, and kind of what was that like, and how did that fit in with your athlete timeline?
Well, it's like most things in life, it's complicated. I graduated from Stanford, and I had wanted to. I had, like, to take a step back. I had this idea when I went to a place like Stanford that I came from a small town. Education wasn't really important, and I really wanted to go to a place like Stanford because I thought that by going there I would become educated. I had no idea what that meant. It was like this vague idea in my head, and I graduated and I realized I knew a lot more, but I didn't really feel educated. So that was one thing that was going on. I also thought that I wanted to be professional, or try to make the Olympics. Professional running really wasn't a thought in my brain at that point, but that I wanted to sort of focus on making an Olympic team, and just sort of see how good I could be not being a student athlete, just being an athlete. And I had gotten injured. I got hit by a car, actually. Broke my leg in Japan. And so the running thing wasn't really going very well.
Yeah.
I had moved to Southern California. I was training kind of long distance with my coach. No internet in those days, kind of hard to do. And I thought, this is not the life I want. And kind of to your point, I didn't feel very well respected as a female athlete, and I didn't like that. So I wanted to do something. And I ended up applying to law school, and got in, and went there, and it was great. And I did actually feel educated when I graduated from law school.
You should.
Yeah. I don't know if I should or shouldn't, but I did feel like I don't know, like something changed in me and how I viewed both myself and the world. Before I got to law school, so I had been injured and then was having a hard time coming back, and then decided to apply to law school. And then, of course, in that interim period of time between application and starting, my running took off. And I went to Europe. I had a great summer. And, in fact, I missed all of orientation, which was kind of mind-boggling. Very scary for me at the time. But and then started law school, and a number of times questioned that decision at that time, because I was like, what? I finally made it. I kind of was making on the international scene, and now I'm back in school, working harder than I'd ever worked before.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
That's interesting. Can you talk about some of you said you didn't feel super respected as a female athlete, so you kind of tried to shift, but then you ended up going back into that world. What were some of the challenges that you faced in that time, probably, was it the 80s? Yeah.
It was very exciting in many respects, because I knew I had opportunities that people before me had never had. So, so being able to be kind of, I wouldn't say, I didn't feel like a pioneer, but I felt like I was enjoying the fruits of people that I knew that had been pioneers. And in some ways, like, I got, my very first Olympic trials was the first time they had 3,000 meters for women. They had not had anything longer than a 1,500, and that had only been added not that long before. So they had a 5,000 meters at that time, and it was a exhibition event because they didn't think enough women did it. There's a whole bunch of geopolitics behind that also, but which is probably way too. It was the Cold War. The Soviets were very big. They didn't want anybody to get ahead of them. So if they didn't have people competing in those events. They didn't want those events to exist. So that was happening. It had nothing to do with sexism or anything else. It had to do with they wanted to control the narrative a little bit. So anyway, so I went. So I kind of came out of that era knowing that really, really appreciating the opportunities that I had, knowing and you know, having met people that were the firsts. You know, I met the first woman who won the marathon, Joan Benoit, and you know, just some of the other people that were just, you know, what, not even, I wouldn't even say another generation, you know, 5, 10, maybe 15 years older than me, that really were sacrificing to make things happen. And then being able to enjoy that. But yeah, it was a battle. There were a lot of people that didn't like it. Most academic or athletic departments were single gender. You know, there was a men's athletic department and women's athletic department, and the differences between how the athletes were treated was dramatic. And there was not very many sports, and at that time was a great, both a great time and a terrible time to be a female track athlete. Great in the sense that there was so many opportunities. It was very easy to add that sport. It didn't take any more gym time. It didn't take, you know, the coach that had been coaching the guys and start coaching the girls kind of thing. But it was also bad time because it was one of the most, you'll see that there are tons of records were set in the 80s because there wasn't anything else. So if you wanted to be a female athlete, you could maybe swim, you could run. There was really no club soccer. There wasn't really any, maybe a little bit of AAU basketball, but track and field was the sport if you were a female athlete in the 80s. And so, and my sister set the high school record for the mile in 1983. Anyway, sometime in the early 80s, early to mid 80s, and it was broken last year.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So. Wow. Yeah, and there's a lot of times when you look at like California state records, you'll see that it just now they're starting to be broken again in sort of large numbers. But a lot of the distance events, those times, if you look at like top 5 times, you'll go back.
Is that because a lot of the athletes are getting pulled to other sports?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I don't have the science to show that, but yeah, I think so. It maybe makes sense to me. Very often, the best soccer players are the best track athletes.
Yeah.
Right? You know, so.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. So how's that? I mean, you've spent a lot of time in women's sports. How's that changed? Now you're working.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed
sports.
in a lot of ways. Again, you know, like most things, there's a plus and minus. Like certainly the pluses are the opportunities, the expectations. That nobody thinks that there should be. Well, maybe there's some people, but you know, generally speaking, it's just accepted. Of course, you know, they laugh. They know, oh, it's so long ago. It's such a different time, but. So I mean that's all great, but there's I think the thing that I'm sorry about in some ways is that there's a lack of appreciation for how different it was not very long ago, and that I mean I want people to take it for granted in the sense like I like our athletes to just assume that they could do this, but I don't know if they understand the kind of work that it took to get here, and I don't know if they quite understand that it, you know, it took a lot of work for a lot of years and a lot of sacrifice by a lot of people to move the needle, and they're beneficiaries of it and they should take it for granted, but I wish they had a little more appreciation for the history. And so I think that's, but I mean overall it's like the opportunities are there, and we were at a meeting with Crystal Conte, our athletic director, and someone asked about whether there would be men's soccer. And he said, we're not adding men's soccer until we add another women's sport.
Yeah, because it's got a balance now.
Yeah, and it was like, we won't do it. It wasn't like, there was no apology for it, like, which was great. Like, for me, like, I was, like, very inspired. But, you know, Texas was probably the last big school to combine their athletic programs.
Yeah, that happened 2 years ago?
Yeah.
When he came on staff.
Yeah. So.
Is that I mean, this is going to be obviously kind of an opinion, but is that something that you see as helping women's sports or as hurting women's sports? Because it's all lumped in, so presumably you're able to share resources and programming and all that, but at the same time, it's all lumped in.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is unique because our football team generates so much income for the university and for the athletic department. I don't know the numbers, but I know it's a very, very small percentage of even major football programs actually make money for the university, let alone, they make money for the athletic department, but this program actually gives money to the university. You know, they're different. They're different entities. I mean, they're related, obviously, but they're different entities. Most football programs are money losers and not money winners. The vast majority of Division I football programs are money losers. They do other things, and there are other reasons to have them. And you know, I'm a big proponent of sports in college for a whole bunch of reasons. But so you know, here, but most sports don't generate income.
Right.
I mean, Kentucky has a basketball program that generates a lot of money. Some basketball programs, both male and female, will be on the plus side. But after that, all sports are money suckers, male or female.
Yeah.
So you might make up for it by increasing your donations, like, you know, and that sort of thing. But I mean, every program in a university is a money drainer, right? The art program doesn't generate money, right? The band doesn't generate money. At least I don't think. I mean, it might generate some, but it doesn't
generate any money. It takes a lot.
Yeah, I mean, that's being at a university, right? I mean, all these programs they generally cost more money than they bring in on a one-on-one basis. So if you sort of look at that and say, well, then there really isn't any reason these programs should be separate, because we all need these resources and they're all in limited supply, and we should be sharing them, and we should be benefiting from each other's knowledge. I mean, we should be integrated, because not only does it make for a more economically effective program, but I think that it makes for a better environment when you can, you know, go talk to Eddie Reese, the most successful coach, one of the most successful coaches ever in the history of athletics, college athletics, you know, and to go, you know, I wouldn't want him to be over in another building because he's the men's coach. Yeah. You know, or that's the one that comes to mind. You know, the fact that we, you know, every now and then a coach from a different sort will stop in and ask my opinion on something, because we're all together here, and I will do the same. You know, how do you do X, Y, and Z? How have you dealt with this? You know, we talk to soccer coaches all the time.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and so if we were all separate, I don't think that would be good for. I don't think that's good for anybody. You can lose, you know, yourself a little bit, but I mean, you know, be successful and you'll be noticed.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are some of the challenges that you faced? You mentioned that you're a mom, and that's something that's obviously important to you. What were some challenges that you faced in doing that and making that decision? Obviously, some women have been able to come back and compete, like Serena Williams comes to mind. You know, but even she's not the dominant tennis player that she was. Like, how does that play out, in your opinion, what you've seen in women's sports through your own experiences and the experiences of others? And does that create an imbalance? And just, sort of, can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a challenge I think for any woman that works. It's hard. It's hard to figure out how to do what you need to do to be successful professionally and to spend the kind of time that you generally want to with your children. You know, childcare is super expensive, and if you have a non-traditional schedule like an athlete does, then you really have to have like full-time care, and you know, most people can't afford that. And you know, Serena Williams, you know, you mentioned Serena Williams. I mean, she's a great role model, and I completely respect her, and I wish I was that kind of athlete. But you know, she has millions and millions of dollars, and even she finds it difficult. So I think that it's very hard. I mean, you have to have a very supportive family, a very supportive spouse, partner, and most female athletes do not make the kind of money that professional male athletes make. You know, if you look at like the 100th best tennis player, who's a man, he makes a great income. If you look at the 100th best female, not so much. When you take out all the costs associated with, you know, lessons and management and travel and all that, you know, it would be really hard to have the kind of family support that you need, and also continue to be an athlete. So it's a challenge, and I admire people that can figure out a way to do it. Most people that I know that have managed it have had that kind of extensive family support, and also are making literally millions of dollars. And even then, it's a challenge. So, I mean, it's sort of the equal challenge for men. It's just that men tend not to be the primary caregivers, and as male athletes, they make a lot more money. Or they tend to make a lot more money. So the equations are a little bit different. Yeah. And there isn't the kind of support. I was talking to a friend of mine who was in terms of as a coach, who was extremely successful and literally had won national championships, but had 2 little kids and wanted more support from her employer, and they said no. They were willing to let her go instead of giving her just a little bit more support, and a little more flexibility with her hours, and a little more flexibility with bringing her kids with her to events and things like that. And then, she said, well, I'm gonna have to leave. They let her go. They've never had as good a coach since then. That was 10 years ago. You hope things are different. I think they're a little bit better, but a little bit. A little bit. The needle's maybe moved, but it's not. It's not a shift. Yeah. So.
Okay, one other thing that stuck out to me, and this is kind of a little bit of a shift. We've been talking a lot about sort of gender issues. I want to shift back. You mentioned in like sort of the early days of women's athletics, you had the exhibition races because the Soviets were running in and they didn't want to be shown up. I don't know very many people who've had an issue with athletics and geopolitics, so I want to know more about that. I want to know more about sort of what that's like. Can you tell me some experiences? I know you have 2 5K times.
Yeah, well, I'm going to leave that one alone. Okay. But so yes, when I was running competitively at the start of my career, there was still like the Iron Curtain, so to speak. There was still Eastern Europe and West Europe and Soviet Union, and it was starting to break as that shift was not that dramatic shift was happening as I was coming up through the ranks. And I have a story where I went to a meet in Japan, and this was after things. This was probably like late '80s, so things had started to kind of melt a little bit, but it was still. And this girl wanted you would often exchange gifts with other athletes, and one of the girls on the Soviet team wanted to exchange a shirt, and it was hard to speak to her. She didn't speak much English, but they asked me to come into their room, and it was very very much like Cloak and Dagger. They're looking down the halls. They rushed me in, and they like change, and I give them. I'm like, of course, and I give them this shirt, and they gave me spoons, kind of the painted spoons, and then someone came knocking at the door, and they put me into the closet and shut the door, and they're like, and it was their coach who was actually, at least one of the coaches on every staff was KGB agent. Wow. Yeah, and they had heard that I came in, and they're like, they told me not to move, and I didn't move. I was hiding in the closet and thinking that I'm pretty sure I'm safe, but it was kind of crazy. And then eventually that person left, and they waited, and then they had me go out. And the next day she comes and she gives me back her shirt, and she's like, she couldn't keep it. Yeah, and that happened. Talking like I spent some time with for whatever reason, there was a girl from East Germany that I would race her, and she would always break the East German record. So they liked me, and I spoke German. But so at some point I was asking, like, we should stay in touch. She's like, no, not allowed. And I was like, I thought we were friends. Like, and she's like, no, not allowed. Wow. And just things like that. There was. When I first started running, I remember going to another meet in Japan, different meet, and there was an athlete named Sergei Budka, and he was a very I think he broke 35 world records in the pole vault, and amazing and very good at just like 1/4 at a time, and they had like a party for all the athletes, and at the end of the meet, kind of a send-off party in this hotel, but the Russians weren't allowed to leave. And so, here's this world champion, world record holder, and he's like, no, I have vodka, stay, I have vodka. We were all going out, into Tokyo, and he couldn't leave
Wow.
He wasn't allowed to leave. So those are some of the stories about like the athletes that I met that had escaped East Germany, had escaped, had defected.
Wow.
It's pretty, listening to their stories, pretty intense.
Yeah.
So.
I think that's good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for taking time to talk to me.
You're welcome.
I enjoyed this. I got a lot out of it. So, I appreciate that. I know you do have a busy schedule, so.
No problem.
Thank you.